Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to see you again. Today we have a video going over the top 8 deck lists from my 64-player tournament, Bounty Battle number 1, that just took place this past Monday. Thank you to everybody that showed up. Thank you to everybody that played. And the biggest thank you to the sponsor of the event, Dapper Games, for providing the prizing for these players to compete for. I just provide the space. And it was so fun. I mean, like, legitimately, I could not have asked for a better, like, first event to really kick this off. And just a massive congratulations to these top 8 players that we're going to be going over their deck lists. Starting off in 8th place, we actually had, this is hilarious enough, the man, the myth, the legend, Ian Richards, aka Mr. Dapper Games himself. Okay, so the sponsor was like, hey, dude, is there any spots left? I'd love to join in and just play a couple games for fun. And I was like, yeah, of course. So he hops in and was on a tear with pudding. He was 4-0. Like, going into round 5 was 4-0, was beating some of the big name players as well with this deck. So, I mean, there is something here, obviously. Unfortunately, fell short a little bit in the last 2 rounds. But putting on an absolute show for the people on the stream was incredible. If you don't know Pudding is a purple-yellow leader from OPO8, and it is when attacking, you may turn 2 cards from the top of your life cards face up, and then add a Dawn from your Dawn deck rested. So pretty solid. You know, there's a lot of intricacy of being able to, you know, manipulate your life with this deck. So turning those life cards face up, and then you know, getting that extra ramp allows you to get to spaces that you wouldn't normally be able to get to at earlier turns. So very fun deck. It was extremely fun to watch. I will say though, if you go back and watch some of the commentary, I've personally never played this deck. I've hardly ever seen it played, so I was a little lost as to what, you know, the idea of the deck really was. But I ended up, you know, after watching some of it, I ended up realizing that this Viola was putting in work. I mean, just the 2-cost blocker here, it was on play. You can choose one of 2 things. You can look at all of your opponent's life cards and place them back in their life area in any order. And then the other one being, you can turn all of your life cards face down. So if you have, you know, 2 cards that were turned face up because of Pudding's effect, you can put those back so that it allows other cards to interact that might need those cards to be face down. Yeah, and just a solid blocker all around. I mean, this card handled the black-yellow Luffy matchup so beautifully. I think it was turn 1, black-yellow Luffy ended up playing out Makino to reorganize their entire life and set it up. And Ian literally plays down this Viola and says, nope, I'm going to reorganize all of that. So phenomenal card, put in some great work throughout the tournament. We also got to see Katakuri quite a bit, which was really cool. You're turning 1 card from the top of your life face down, and that is the requirement, so you do have to have it face up. And then you get to add a Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active, which is also very solid. So this card was putting in work. We also had the New Gate, which was really nice, adding the top card of your deck to the top of your life, then looking at all of your life cards, place 1 card onto the top of your deck and return them in any desired order. So really solid card. 7k bodies right here for 6 Dawn was really neat to see. I love kind of like the idea of what he was going for here. One thing that kind of caught me off guard was that he was only playing 1 Katakuri. So truth be told, I didn't take a look at all of these lists before going into the video. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit fresh and exciting. But when I saw that he was running 1 Katakuri, I was like, whoa, that's surprising. I thought that this card would be played a little heavier. But to my understanding, I think the big plays, you know, with Doflamingo being very relevant in this meta and very aggressive decks like Purple Luffy, you know, having cards like Charlotte Lin, the 9 cost as well as the 10 cost, is just so important for being able to stay alive and manage certain situations. So I understand what he was going for here. I still believe, though, that Katakuri has a spot, but obviously he plays the deck much better than I do, and he knows the deck much better than I do. We also had Thunderbolt, as well as Conquest of the Sea, which I thought was really interesting. Thunderbolt pretty much like sealed the deal against BY Luffy, because there was a turn they weren't able to play Sabo and protect the board. And so just being able to get rid of that blocker and then push for game was really interesting. Conquest of the Sea, you know, in my opinion, I think this is kind of like a purple Luffy Dofi tech, but I really like the idea here. It's just a shame that it costs so much. You know, it's such a heavy cost. But obviously getting rid of 2 6-cost characters is very powerful. So I definitely think he was onto something here. But congrats to Ian for the 8th place finish. And going into 7th place, we did have, I believe, our only Doflamingo. I could be wrong. But I believe this was our only Doflamingo that made it into the top 8. And this was Izzy Man taking 7th place with Doflamingo. So congrats to him. One card that I saw that was very interesting when I was looking at this, like it was a fairly standard Doflamingo list, but I didn't expect this, was Gion, a Navy 2K counter. That was your turn once per turn. When your opponent activates an event, your opponent places 1 card from their hand at the bottom of their deck. Pretty interesting. In my opinion, pretty interesting. Just because it has to be on your turn, so it's mostly relating to like counter cards. And obviously, you know, very popular in the meta right now is Purple Luffy. We've also seen Blackbeard running the Dragon Claw event. We've also seen some counter cards from like RP Luffy, obviously running Giant as well as the Radical Beam. Couldn't think of the name of the card for a second, but yeah, thought this was a pretty interesting tech. I mean, it's a 2K counter, so it can fill the deck really at any point. But he didn't stop there. He also had a one of Doflamingo 7 cost, which I've typically been seeing this card in BOA, so I thought this was pretty interesting, just having this card in general. You know, the one of Kaido as well. I do think that there's decks that don't run Kaido, and then there's decks that run like a one of Kaido. I love one of techs. I think that they're really nice, and they kind of just make the, you know, they make certain matchups feel a lot easier. So having the Kaido in there is actually really cool. I enjoy this card into, you know, the BY Luffy matchup, which typically isn't that great. And Doflamingo is really solid into like the mirror. It's really solid into Purple Luffy. You know, obviously you kind of want to be aggressive into Purple Luffy, so it's not like this card is really that impactful if you're not able to go wide, but bouncing back a Luffy Taro can be pretty solid. And then going down to the events, very typical one of Femur. The one of Raging Tiger Blade was kind of substituted out for a one of Red Rock. So instead of typically running like 2 Gravity Blade, this was put in place. And I've always loved this card. I think this card is just fantastic. So it being able to get rid of cards that are really annoying and pesky to deal with, such as like 8-cost Kid, you know, potentially a really strong like beater body that's just coming at you like a 10-cost Shanks, you know, is just being able to remove that and deal with that is very powerful. So pretty awesome to see a couple of interesting techs in this deck list, and I like to see what Izzy was doing here. And going into 6th place, we did have BY Luffy from Abishan. Congratulations on the finish here. I think BY Luffy is one of those decks that I always find, you know, like there's like 46 cards that are locked in on this list, and then there's like those 4 to 5 spots that you can kind of just interchange and put a couple of random cards in there, which I think is really cool. And Makino being one of them, the one of tech, I typically do see a lot of people in OP09 running at least like 1 to potentially 2 of these in the list. Having Awakeners is so important into every matchup, so just the more that you can have of that is very helpful. But one of on the Makino, as well as one of on both the kind of tech choice blockers, one being the Nami as well as the other being the Emporio Ivankov. I've seen kind of word from, you know, very popular BY Luffy players running this card and saying that it's actually a really great choice into the Doflamingo matchup. Just being able to trash a card from the top or bottom of your life gets you closer to Awakening. You get to then put a 5-cost card onto the top of your life face down, using one of the baby Luffy's, Sabo's, Ace, if you will. You know, you can then bring that card back out and bring your leader up to 7, but present yourself with a potentially 2 blockers, as well as, you know, just a itching closer to getting to that Awakening standpoint, which is really nice. I also saw 3 Kuzan instead of the 4, which is like pretty typical, but it looks as though the substitution for that was 2 forms of Ice Age. I don't see this typically played in BY very much, but I understand why, you know, some people have it in the deck from time to time. It's because it's an extremely valuable card for being able to pop things with the 5-cost Sabo or the 5-cost Rocket Luffy. So I like the idea. You know, having Kuzan stick on the board isn't always, you know, the most doable thing, if you will. That card seems to get removed more now that a lot of decks have kind of caught up on the removal pieces in their own decks. So I like the idea of Ice Age. It seems like it would probably get bottom decked a lot, but if you do happen to see it in the match that you know really want to, it can be a really powerful asset. So obviously Abishan crushing it at 6th place, going X1, only losing the first round and then winning 5 matches afterwards, really putting in some work. So congratulations there for the 6th place finish. We've got Bonney making the top 8. Love to see it. I hate playing against Bonney because I find this deck to be so annoying to beat sometimes, because it's so powerful late game, and the leader effect is just generically good. But right here we have Paul's deck for the jewelry Bonney taking 5th place, and obviously, you know, I'm sure many of you know the idea behind Bonney, but just getting to the late game and then establishing your really large bodies such as Eustace Kid, now with the starter deck edition, the 9-cost Shanks from starter deck 16, being able to remove rested characters is such a powerful asset, and still leaving 1 Dawn active for leader effect. We also have the 10-cost Doflamingo, which is oppressive. This card is so powerful at the end of the game, can buy Bonney enough time to potentially develop a board for lethal. And I mean, it is the powerhouse of this deck in my opinion. But you know, getting there is, you know, establishing your board with a lot of Cavendish, a lot of Carrot to kind of slow down the game, prevent your opponent from doing every single, you know, awful action that they can potentially do, or these really punishing swings at you, because this deck can brick quite a bit. I think that Carrot really slows that down and helps you, you know, kind of stay alive until you get to those really important cards. I do like the one of Basil Hawkins. Basil Hawkins was typically kind of taken out of the Bonney deck because of, you know, the lack of its resourcefulness in most matchups. But it is really solid into Lucci, and Lucci's still a fairly popular deck, if not taking probably the top 5 most played lists in the meta right now. Yeah, so I think just putting in a Basil Hawkins just in case of, you know, running into that matchup is extremely fair. And yeah, I love to see it though. I want to see Bonney continue to do well, because we all know that green has been down a little bad, and I kind of want Bonney to, you know, make a comeback in OP10 if possible. But congratulations again to Paul for the 5th place finish. And we had Justice taking 4th place with Rob Lucci. Going into the top 4, Justice actually ended up winning the trial event that I had for these Bounty Battle series, these Bounty Battle tournaments that I'll be hosting. Justice took 1st place in that first event and is basically running it back with Lucci. Only lost 1 single game in round 4, so 5-1. Very, very, very impressive run. I don't believe he was running the Hina the last time, so I think he tried out Hina this time just to see if it, worked for him, being in trash with the combination of Rebecca and Lucci. There's definitely, a lot of plays there. I personally am a big fan of Hina being a one-of in this deck in OP09 because it just feels like there's so many random spots where that card just kind of fits in and it works extremely well. One thing that I like to note about Justice's list in particular is that, the Who's Who typically in OP08 was ran as a 4-of because you needed it for the mirror match. But I think that Lucci has kind of, gone less, they peeled back a little bit on what we need to have for the mirror matchup since it was such a popular deck then, and kind of more focusing on what are the most popular decks in the meta at the moment, which would be Doflamingo, Purple Luffy, Shanks. Who's Who doesn't really fall into that place here in OP09 as much as it did typically in previous sets. So instead, the substitution comes in with Kaku, and I've seen actually quite a lot of plays coming out with like a Moria into a Rebecca Moria into Rebecca Helmeppo, and Rebecca picking back up the Spandine, and Spandine playing out either Khalifa or Kaku, depending on how much, minus cost is needed for the removal play. But doing that and then having Jack on board, and Jack just being a really powerful, consistent removal is like terrifying. So I've been seeing, some of Justice's games were running a lot of, Kaku, and it had exceptional moments where it really succeeded and gave him, an incredible chance to win the game. And we also have the Kaido being an incredible answer to the Blackbeard matchup, which we didn't actually have any Blackbeards in the top 8 this time. We did in the previous event, but they didn't make it in this time. So Kaido being that answer, also just a really solid card into quite a lot of matchups. If you're able to stay healthy and play this card out, maybe you're missing the Moria play, or maybe you just want to play this out both prior to playing out Moria because you want to really get a value removal turn off of Moria. I think Kaido is just kind of like that next best answer. Being able to remove a 7 cost but an 8 cost with your leader swing and pretty much any character, if you just attach if you punch in like a Tempest Kick or an Ice Age or something like that, or a Suru for that matter. Yeah, really solid. The 1-of 6 King pistol, just a solid tech that Justice has been on for such a long time. Having this as a 3K counter and being able to get rid of some of those non-counters in hand and put something maybe very useful into trash that is relevant to your following turn is very nice. And the 1-of Finger Pistol. I love this card. I really do. I love this card. It works so well for Lucci, but it's just a generically solid like black event. I really do. I really think this is like such a generically good black event. So Finger Pistol as a 1-of is a pretty great tech. I enjoy this. And with all the reduction in the deck, it still allows you to be, enough Dawn to do a removal play, but also play defensively with a blocker. So congratulations to Justice for taking 4th place. And in 3rd place, we had Derek with the Red Purple Luffy. There was actually quite a bit of Red Purple Luffy out in the event on Monday, and it was really cool to see because I think this deck is super fun, but I also just haven't figured out how to pilot it quite well enough just yet. There's turns where I feel like if I don't see the exact piece I'm looking for, I just don't know what the substitution should be. But this was probably the most, in my opinion, the most interesting list, because it had like the ratios of cards were not what I expected it to be, and it kind of caught me off guard. And then there were also cards that just weren't played, or that are played, excuse me, that I wasn't expecting, like Silver's Rayleigh. I haven't been seeing in this deck very much, so this was very cool to see. 2 of the 5 6K on play. If your opponent has 2 or more characters with a base power of 5K or more, draw 2 cards and trash 1 from hand. Really nice cycle, very similar to Queen in that respect, so I like the idea here. And then we also had, where was it? The 3 Ben Beckman, 2 Eustace Captain Kidd for the 7 Dawn turn. I thought this was really interesting, you know, because that 7 Dawn turn is really important, and the Ben Beckman, I think, was putting in work for Derek. He was playing in the finals, by the way, so was undefeated until that very last match. And yeah, that last match could not have went more unfortunately for Derek there, just whiffing on a little bit of that counter power towards the end of the game. Really needed to see it. But the Silver's Rayleigh at 2 as well. Again, this is kind of a card that I haven't typically been seeing in this deck, but after watching some of the games, I fully understand why he runs it. It's so powerful, and it can just buy you time to get that extra body on board and then potentially swing for game the turn after. So I love the idea. I think that, you know, he's got something going here. The 2 of Monkey D. Dragon, 3 of 9-cost Luffy, which this card was putting in work. There were actually turns that I didn't even fully understand why he was doing certain things until I realized why he had left like a certain card active the whole time. He would play 9-cost Luffy and do Dawn -2, but had Zoro Juro on board, so he would just swing 4. Doesn't matter if he's not attacking the opponent's life. You know, he just wanted to swing 4, get the Dawn back as active, then use the leader effect to get another Dawn back as active. So he would end the turn with 2 Dawn active for Gum Gum Giant, Radical Beam, and the such. It was very, very interesting. I love to see that play. It definitely got me thinking. And the 1 of Nika Luffy, the 10-cost Luffy, with the 1 of Goldie Roger. I was kind of wondering why Gold Roger was even in the list, if I'm being completely honest. I thought that, you know, just having Luffy was probably the better choice, the 10-cost. But then, you know, I don't know why it never really occurred to me. You're a 3-life leader. Going to 0 is not that hard. So if you play Gold Roger and your opponent blocks, because this deck can swing very tall, you know, it's game over. So you can get a lot of scary bodies onto the board, and Gold Roger can just kind of finish out the game for you. I thought it was really cool, just kind of the little 1 of tech. And yeah, I mean, obviously it performed pretty well for him. We had 2 of the Lead Performer Disaster. This is a card that I've been seeing kind of substituted out for the 3-cost. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a 3-cost event card with Big Mom's face on it that ramps a Dawn for, I want to say it's like no, actually it's not even leader locked. I don't think it's type locked. But that's what I've been seeing as like a substitute. But he decided to go with the Lead Performer Disaster, which I thought was really interesting. And no Queen in the deck, which I was like, how are we running this deck with no Queen? The substitution being Onami as well as the Silver's Rayleigh. So again, he's obviously onto something. Absolutely crushed it. Was playing in the finals. Taking 3rd place, so huge congratulations to Derek. And taking 2nd place was Patrick with Rob Lucci. Yeah, very similar in ways to how Justice had his list, but very different in certain ratios, but also tech choices, which I thought was very interesting. I love the 2-cost Uta. This card is such a menace and like annoying beyond belief to deal with. Removing this card is so important, but you can't with your leader. So it has to be, it has to be through either some removal effect, or it has to be through, you know, a swing from character on board, which can be very difficult to accomplish when Lucci's able to just constantly remove your board over and over and over again. So Uta, as a 2 of, I love the idea. Very solid card, and I think it also goes well with kind of the other tech choices, which is Kaku being a really powerful asset into the Doflamingo matchup, removing a 3-cost, establishing a 5-cost body that is very tricky for Doflamingo to remove, other than through Jozu or, you know, Gravity Blade. So I love the idea there. Still running the 1 of Finger Pistol as well, just like Justice was. And I think the 2 of Kaido is now kind of become sort of like a staple I've been seeing in a lot of these decks. This I found pretty interesting. Only 2 of Jack. I think this card is really powerful. So for me, I'm a little shocked to see it as only a 2 of. But again, Rebecca can always bring this card back if it does go into trash. You know, your most powerful asset is obviously the Moria play. So it's not like you have to see this, but there are matchups where if I don't see Jack as Lucci, I feel as though I'm in a really rough spot. And so I was pretty surprised to see it at 2, but I'm clearly doing exceptionally well with the deck, taking 2nd place. Massive congrats to Patrick. And in 1st place, ladies and gentlemen, Eric with his Shanks build here. So solid, and also ran a couple of cards that I kind of thought were just gone. I thought they were out of the meta, and also running a one tech choice card that was really interesting. I remember he gave us some insight onto the card, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but I'll maybe have to pull up the clip of that or something. But yeah, so running a couple of cards that, again, I thought that they were kind of just gone. Not many people were playing them in Shanks anymore, but he's still running the 1 of 10-cost Shanks, which is really solid. He's running the 2 of Building Snake, being able to reduce a character by 3k power. Again, I don't know what happened that Shanks kind of started pulling away from this removal based idea and like took this card out of the deck, but I thought this card was so powerful, you know, in the removal based Shanks idea. And I don't know, it got kind of removed after a little bit, but I have seen a lot of people not running Uta as well, but we are running the Uta here as a 3 of to search out those, you know, those red-haired pirates and find the pieces that we need. Typically, this deck does have a little bit of inconsistency with the top end, but, you know, that card can help find some of the pieces. Now, this is the one card that I had not seen in any other Shanks deck. At least I just hadn't seen it. It might have been played in some other lists. But Karina, a 3-cost, 0-power, 1k blocker that's on play, give an opponent's character minus 2,000 power for the turn. Obviously, great when you want to play this removal-based Shanks deck. You're able to reduce something's power, right? Pop it with either Newgate, Ben Beckman, put it in range. Well, you can't put it in range for Rayleigh because you wouldn't have enough Dawn to do an 11 Dawn turn in this deck, but you get the idea. Just having a blocker is already, 1, successful enough, but 2, to reduce its power and then have some other removal as well. You know, while having Yasop on the board, you can now reduce something by 4,000 power, or no, 3,000 power. That's right, 3,000 power with Karina as well as Yasop swing. So very tricky, very scary card to deal with, because I personally I had no idea that this was even a card other than when I played it in pre-release. So I really like the tech choice here, and apparently it did him very well. Obviously, the 7-cost Newgate in combination with cards like Karina like Yasop, and using just 10 cost Shanks in general, putting that with Building Snake really allows you to get a lot of stuff in range of being popped. And I think one thing that kind of surprised me as far as like how the list was looking was no copies of the 2-cost Red Hawk, the Gum Red Hawk, and instead using the Bad Manners Kick Course as the sole event for the deck list. I thought that was a little bit surprising because this deck can brick quite a bit. Obviously, we're still running a ton of counter power in this deck list, but I mean, just looking at it off the top of my head, I mean, it looks as though there's probably about 17 bricks in the deck, and that's a lot, you know. And I think that not running that event was very surprising to me, but I can't question it when my man absolutely crushed it, 6-0, taking home the dub with Shanks. But ladies and gentlemen, it was such a fun event. If you want to go back and watch the stream, we do have the broadcast here on my YouTube channel as well as my Twitch channel. I'll be uploading probably tomorrow a simplified version of all the matches, just kind of shortened down to, you know, very quick snippets of all the matches. But I want to just say thank you to everybody that participated, and thank you to everybody that registered for the next event. We've got an event coming up this upcoming Monday, the Bounty Battle number 2, that is going to be having three boxes of OPO9, as well as event packs, play mats, and believe this, oh, I wish I had it on me to show you, but it's actually behind me. We are going to have beef jerky as part of the prizing. I laugh because it was not a sponsorship that I had expected, but a friend of mine runs an amazing company and makes their own beef jerky flavors. It is fantastic. So that's going to be really fun. So not only competing for cards, but beef jerky as well, ladies and gentlemen. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. Where are you going to find that anywhere else? But if you do want to sign up, you can join the Discord. The link is posted in there, as well as on my X account. So be sure to check it out. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.